Welcome to Bad Bible Study number 2, where I'm going to teach you today straight from the Bible how you can be considered righteous without having to do anything good. It's not like you're going to need to be concerned with how to be ethical or how to be kind or even how to be consistent. Our goal is simple. We just want that stamp of approval from God. We want you to be justified and righteous. And we're going to stick close to the text because, after all, this is a Bible study, and we're going to see this amazing pattern of exactly how you can do whatever you want, including some really bad things, as long as sometimes you obey God in doing some of those bad things for Him. So let's get started and figure out how you can be considered righteous, biblically speaking. I think before the examples, maybe a little groundwork, what to do and what not to do. Again, please don't worry about moral consistency. That doesn't help you at all here. Protecting others, no points awarded. Providing for your family, sorry, that's not going to cut it. Ethical decision making, don't be silly. Here's what we're shooting for. Things like obedience at any cost, faith in things you have no good reason to believe, perfect alignment with God's will, even when that will looks awfully immoral itself, and narrative positioning. Go ahead and be in the right place at the right time to the right family, the right chosen group, in the right land, under the right conditions. You see, righteousness is less about what you do and more about whose side you're on. Isn't it cool that God has been so consistent? Because Christians today will say the same thing. Righteousness isn't about you. Salvation isn't about you. It's not about what you can do or what you can earn. This is all a free gift from God, as long as you happen to have been born at the right time and place where you would, because of your culture, upbringing, or surrounding, get lucky enough to believe in this one particular God, despite the horrific evidence against him and the same evidence that we have for pretty much every other man-made religion on earth ever. But not about what you do. And isn't that the get out of jail free card that we all kind of want? So here's our case studies. Let's start with Lot. Lot, who is called righteous. I looked up a biblical definition for the term righteous, so we had some working concept here, and it is being in right relationship or right standing with God, aligning with his perfect character, laws, and justice. That's what it means to be righteous. With that in mind, let's get back to Lot. We've talked about this before, but you know what it's like when a mob is rushing your house to rape the angels that came to visit you, and you have such high dutiful responsibility to these angels, being that they came from the God you need to be obedient to, that you offer up your daughters instead to be raped by the town. That was the best decision that this man who's hanging out with angels could come up with, and he is called righteous 3 times. Now, I, in my stupid, sinly flesh, would have thought that maybe being righteous would be offering yourself instead of your daughters, or praying and having faith that God will get you through this. After all, you have a couple angels hanging out with you. But no, the correct, obvious decision that would please God would be to offer the property in your household, your daughters, to be torn apart. Righteous behavior, dude. But I'll go ahead and read you the verse in 2 Peter 2:7. And if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man, living among them day after day, was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. Again, 3 times considered righteous. You know what I love is the silly idea in the modern church that we shouldn't be getting drunk. 2 of the men that I'm going to cover with you today, after being called righteous by God, immediately get drunk and do horrific things. Lot is the first one who lets his daughters get him drunk and then sleeps with them, which, by the way, is part of the genealogy of Jesus. Just a fun fact there. So what's the takeaway for Lot? Have good hospitality toward the divine at the sake of your own family, and you can be considered righteous. My next example I'll cover quickly because I have this entire video about it, but we all know that David is a man after God's own heart. What more could you want? That is the complement of compliments in the Bible. And of course it goes to David because Listen what God says about David. This comes from 1 Kings 15:5. David did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and did not turn aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. So it doesn't take a genius to understand that biblically we are told David did everything right, everything God wanted him to do, except one thing. There's only one blemish on David, and it only has to do with Uriah, not Bathsheba, not his own adultery, just the murder of an innocent man to cover both of those things up. Not the 200 foreskins that he took. Not betraying Israel even for a time when Saul was leading it. Not the sin that was supposedly so grave of taking a census that God had to punish him with 70,000 men. No, only one time, according to the Bible, did David not measure up. And again, I'm trying to teach you how you can have the same. So maybe hearing more from Scripture will fill in those gaps. In Acts 13:22, I have found David, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. Man, between that and 1 Kings 15:5, it kind of seems like you can do almost anything you want, all your own selfish desires and ambitions, all the deceit, sexual immorality that you want. You just have to be willing to do what God wants you to do. And that is a great lesson that we learn from David, because the only reason he has his position is because Saul, his predecessor, refused to do quite literally everything that God wanted him to do when he did not fulfill the genocide that was commanded of him to the full extent. So God said, I'll find someone who will. David, and David does, time and again for this God. And unlike Saul, who spared people, David is considered a man after God's own heart, because he actually goes above and beyond when he gets insane request for mutilation, like 100 foreskins to get a bride. He'll give you 200. So if you do some pretty messed up, like X-rated torture and murder to get yourself a wife, just remember to do it 2 times the expectation. And it's so frustrating to hear Christians preach this different. Oh, God uses broken, worthless men like David. Look at all the sins of David, but look what God did through him. No, God says David only messed up once, and that he was able to do so much through him because David was willing to do all those acts that God wanted him to do. Why don't we portray that correctly so that we can all get in on the benefit? But let's move on to another example here. Abraham also attains the word righteous, but he does so because of his great faith. That's what Genesis 15:6 tells us. The same kind of faith that would have him follow this God into committing murder on his own child, which again, God says Abraham's faith pleased him. So he is pleased with Abraham's willingness to kill. It wouldn't have been bad. It would have been what God ordered, and thus it would have been good. And so God is happy that despite it being something that otherwise would be bad, if he commands it, his boy Abe is going to do the right thing, the wrong thing, taking innocent life for no reason except a test that an omniscient God put up to you. And Abraham's not like a great guy aside from that. We know he's got a household full of slaves, one of which he's going to rape, and then out of cowardice to his other wife, send out into the wilderness to die. And the Bible tells us that he's a liar. But again, things like lying and owning slaves and raping your slaves and then casting your slaves out to die in the wilderness, those things don't get in the way between you and God. They definitely don't get in the way of you being a righteous man. God's got your back. He's probably going to go help out Hagar and her son. Don't worry, God's got it. You probably knew that all along, didn't you? And yeah, when you raised that knife to kill your kid, you probably knew God would either resurrect him or stop you or something else, as I'm told, but that would defeat the purpose of a test. But let's not worry about the details. Just be willing to do quite literally anything this God asks of you, and you will be righteous. That's not terrifying at all. Let's move on to our next example, Noah. We'll do this quick. We know in Genesis 6:9 that before the flood, Noah is considered a blameless and righteous man, specifically that he walked faithfully with God. Then there's a flood, and immediately after the flood, he gets drunk, So don't worry, that's not going to stop you from being a good guy. Gets found to be naked, which causes shame and or it's an allusion to something else terrible happening. And out of embarrassment and ego, he curses his son and the generations of his son, essentially into slavery. Now, even if we consider that he was only called blameless before, this is the character, the nature of someone who was faithfully walking with God. It doesn't seem to be out of character, and God certainly doesn't punish him for this behavior. If anything, it would seem that God helps to fulfill the curse that Noah gave, which I think proves that to God, Noah was still a righteous and blameless person. So get drunk, and if you embarrass yourself, just blame it on your kid, is, I guess, our takeaway here. Technically, the word used in James 2:25 is justified, but approved by is kind of what we're talking about. And how was Rehab approved by God? Oh, when she lies for his people. That's right. If you thought deceit was wrong, it's not. You've just got to do it for the right side. Oh, and play both sides, by the way, too, because that's what Rehab does. She doesn't actually know who's going to win. She's heard the terror that the Israelites have done, and she's aware that that terror could happen to her, but she plays both sides. And then her and her family are spared from the genocide that happens, even though I always hear that genocide is only toward men because it was a military fort. But then why was Rehab and her entire family there? Those facts, again, don't matter. All that matters is you can be a female, and if you lie to help God's chosen males do their chosen horrific activities of genocide, then you can be found approved via your faith. And I'm feeling redundant, but the list goes on. I mean, I just want you guys to know. How about I list a few more you can look up on your own if you want some more tips? You can pull a Samson and essentially break a bunch of your own rules that are so important, kill countless people, including yourself at the end of your life, and God's blessing will be on you the entire time. Be Jephthah, a judge who's going to help win a military victory by offering your daughter as a human sacrifice. There's a famous list in Hebrews 11 of great figures of faith, and he made the cut. Someone that we know offered his daughter. Well, he says he offers the first thing to come out of his house to greet him when he gets home. So he may not have known, but God definitely knew, accepted the vow, gave the military victory, and then it says that Jephthah did what he said he would do. And that is great faith. I know Abraham always gets all the credit for the faith of being willing to kill his child, but Jephthah does it, and he gets credited with the faith too. We should be using him as an example way, way more. There's Jacob, who quite literally inherits God's blessing, and yeah, he steals it via deception, but God still grants it. So obviously, deception and theft are not an issue, getting in the way of you being righteous before God, and so many others. But what is the pattern here? Well, one, righteousness is declared. Okay, it doesn't have to be demonstrated. You can be credited it or called it or labeled it or listed as it. It's a title that you get assigned, not a conclusion drawn from your behavior. What a stupid thought that would be. And remember, faith and alignment with God, that's the key. That's how you can lie to help people genocide. That's why when you own slaves and rape and marry one and then endanger that one, no problem. You're just setting up what God needs to happen in the family tree. I mean, you know what seems to create moral flexibility where you can still be considered righteous despite your bad deeds is just your proximity to God. Are you close enough? Because it kind of seems like all these people are doing the same things as all the horrific enemies of the land, like child sacrifice or having no problem with God wiping out everyone around them, getting drunk and knocking it back with your daughters. Like, the only difference is they were on God's side or God is on their side. I always hear about free will, but I can't figure out how that plays in here. I guess the free will to continue to do all the horrific things that all the other bad people do, but the lack of free will to be claimed by God, aka just get lucky. That doesn't sound like good advice, though. Maybe you can just make sure that when your story is written down, you get kind of the narrative framing correct. Like, you're probably going to do some bad stuff. I mean, even David did. Remember when he killed that guy to cover up his affair? But if you're willing to go and kill for God after that, that. You'll be righteous despite that. You don't even have to let your flaws get in the way. Really, what you have to think about is the outcome. Did what you did advance God's plan? Did what you say make God feel good? If yes, those words and actions are now considered righteous. Good job. If no, now your actions are condemned. It really is that simple. I mean, I didn't have to give you all these examples. Just obey God no matter what, despite any cost ever, and you're good. Anything else, you're bad. And for the last time, do not confuse righteousness with moral goodness. That's not how this works. I'll see you Tuesday with a new video, and until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Anne, Boris, Chris, Greysteel, Gnarlywill, Grant, GVI, Jimmy, Joe, Kitboga, Matthew, Perry, and Shawn; my Humanist heroes: Chris, Craig, James, Jarrod, Kristi; my Atheist advocates: Aquitar, Caleb, Dakota, Dan, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jeremy, Jugs, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Sparky, and Thomas, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. Your support is the entire reason I can do this. If you've considered supporting this channel, please join these fine people today.